Hello, and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and today we are talking higher education. We've been talking higher education all week, and I'm very excited to have with me Bill Symonds. He is the director of the Global Pathways Institute at Arizona State, as well as a professor there at Arizona State. And one of the reasons that we're getting in touch with Bill is that we have this Western Pathways Conference coming up. But I'm going to take a step back. Bill, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for letting us interview you. How are you today?
I'm great. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Fantastic. Well, Bill, would you mind giving us a little bit of your background and why education is important to you?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I spent much of my career actually as a business journalist with Business Week magazine. Some of your listeners might remember when print journalism was a lot more dominant than it is now. And almost everybody in Colorado got a copy of the Denver Post or the Rocky Mountain News and spent a lot of time reading it. At the same time, Business Week was a really major publication for most of the time I was there. Really had a dominant impact on covering the world of business and shaping how CEOs and others reacted. And while I was at Business Week, one of the things I covered was education. In 2007, that led to a new opportunity for me as print journalism was declining. I went to Harvard University and started researching why our existing approach to school reform hadn't been more effective. You might remember that when No Child Left Behind was passed in 2001, the promise was that every child in America was going to be up to grade level by 2014. Of course, that was 4 years ago now. We didn't meet that goal. And I was looking at why we had fallen short and what we needed to do to create a more effective education system. So that led to the publication of a report called Pathways to Prosperity that came out in 2011. We had a major conference at Harvard in 2013. And then at that point, I was invited to come to Arizona State to continue the work. And the reason for that is Arizona State is now the largest public university in the United States, and it's been named by U.S. News as the most innovative university as well. Very interested in creating a more effective education system, so it's really been a perfect home for the Global Pathways Institute.
Wonderful. So this Global Pathways Institute, how was that born out? Who created that? Why was that such... well, you explained why it was such a need, but let's start with the basics. How did that come about? Who spoke on that?
Okay, so what happened was, again, I was at Harvard, and we were looking at how to grow the work and have more impact. And Harvard, as some of your listeners probably know, is a fairly elitist institution. Our work is really focused on how we can prepare all young adults to achieve career success. Some of them obviously are going to go to a four-year college like CU or CSU, but many of them are not. We're interested in really the entire population and how we can help them find a career that's going to give meaning to their life and also allow them to earn a living wage, to become financially independent. So back in 2013 and 2014, we felt we needed a better home for the work, and Arizona State emerged as the ideal candidate for that. It was created actually by a group of business executives in Arizona who thought this would really be beneficial to Arizona in the West. They invited me to come out here. So that happened in 2014, 4 years ago, and that's when it was created.
Fantastic. Well, Bill, one of the things that's been born out of this Global Pathways Institute is this Western Pathways Conference. Do you want to give a little background on how that started?
Sure, be happy to. So the idea of the Western Pathways Conference is really to focus attention on how we can create more effective systems for preparing young adults for career success. If you look at our current system, there are really a lot of problems with that. Right now we tell students that if they want to be successful, they need to go to a four-year college. And there's nothing wrong with a four-year college. It certainly helps many people. But the cost of that has gone up exponentially. As I'm sure people listening to this are well aware, student debt in the United States has now reached $1.4 trillion. That's more than the amount of debt that's on credit cards, auto loans, et cetera. I mean, it's just a staggering amount of debt that young people are taking on. And the problem is that there's a real mismatch between education on the one hand and what the workforce needs are on the other. So only about a third of all jobs actually require a four-year degree. The rest require something less than that, maybe an associate's degree, an industry-recognized certificate, et cetera. And those certificates and associate degrees can be gathered much faster and at lower cost than a four-year degree. But we have not been putting enough emphasis on that. So the goal of the conference is really looking at how can we create a more effective and efficient system for preparing young people for success.
And I, for one, am a huge fan of this conference. I actually was there last year, and I did a few radio interviews because we held the Western Pathways Conference here in Denver, and it was quite a lovely program. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the past conferences where some of your goals were reached?
Right. So actually, the way this has evolved is in 2015, we had something called the Southwest Pathways Conference. That was held right here at Arizona State, and we involved 5 states, including Colorado. Colorado sent a very significant team to the Southwest Pathways Conference. And, you know, that very first conference has led to a lot of action. One of the people who attended that conference was Noel Ginsberg. And Noel, following that, helped create, and he's now the CEO of CareerWise, which has gotten national attention in Colorado as an effort to really create more apprenticeship opportunities for students. So I think that's a direct outcome of the conference. What happened is in 2016, following the second Southwest Pathways Conference, there was a lot of broader interest in can we expand this conference to the to the entire West. And one of the people I started working with there was Jeff Wasden, president of the Colorado Business Roundtable, who was really enthusiastic about this. And Jeff felt that this was really a perfect fit for the issues that members of the Business Roundtable, both nationally and Colorado, really care about. So we worked with him, and the first Western Pathways Conference was held last May in downtown Denver, and it was a tremendous success. This year, we're moving to Utah. The conference will be hosted by Governor Gary Herbert.
Fantastic. So how many states are actually considered in this Western Pathways Conference? I know we have Arizona, Colorado, Utah.
Right. Well, you know, Alex, different people use different definitions of what the West is or is not.
Yes.
The Western Governors Association defines it as 19 states, starting with the Dakotas and running a straight line all the way down to Texas, and then everything west of that, including Hawaii and Alaska. So that's one definition. Actually, the conference, though, has attracted states from well beyond that. For example, Wisconsin is very enthusiastic about it and will be sending a significant team to the conference this year. So we even had somebody from Vermont last year, which is not Western as far as U.S. geography is concerned. If you're looking at it from the viewpoint of Europe, of course, I guess Vermont would be considered Western. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know that we had Texas there last year and Alaska there, although considered West. That was quite a trek for them to make it out. So what are your goals for this year's conference?
Yeah, so our goals are sort of the same goals. We're really trying to change the culture of education. So there's a much better fit between what's going on in the schools and colleges and what the needs of the workforce are. The other significant thing is the impact this will have on individual students. So we're big proponents of trying to help young people figure out what career is really going to give meaning to their life. And, you know, Alex, I think that's one of the most important issues in our economy right now. Research done by Gallup shows that only a third of adults actually like their job.
That's so sad.
Only 1/3 are really satisfied with their job and really like it. The other 2/3 either dislike their job or they're actively disengaged, which means they're constantly bad-mouthing the company where they work and you know, trying to undermine their boss and that kind of thing, which is not a good situation.
No. So really, only 33% of people actually enjoy their jobs. That's really very sad.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, when you're listening to the radio, every week they're talking about over the hump day. You know, we've made it by over the hump day, or on Thursday, so there's only one more day left. They're speaking really to all these people who do not like what they're doing. And so I think from an individual standpoint, what we're trying to do is create a system that is really going to help young people figure out what career do they belong in, what's going to give the most meaning and satisfaction to their life. And then once they decide that, they're much better equipped to decide what they want to study when they leave high school and go into a community college or university.
Right. You mentioned that one-third of all jobs, only one-third of all jobs require a 4-year degree. And I found that fascinating. As myself, when I was on the job market, I had some college education, but I definitely didn't have a degree. And I feel like I had trouble. Every job that I wanted to apply for required a bachelor's degree. So that's interesting to me that only one-third of all jobs require that. And perhaps I was limiting my search results. Do you have any tips for somebody who's out there looking for something that doesn't require a 4-year degree, and how we can get a better grasp on the key terms to search?
Well, when I say doesn't require a 4-year degree, what I mean is that the skills required by that position, you don't need a 4-year education to acquire those. That's different from what employers might say when they're trying to hire someone. They might say they want somebody with a college degree, a 4-year college degree, even if they don't really need those skills. It's a way of sorting out applicants and dismissing those who don't have a 4-year degree. There's a growing movement, Alex, to try to change that whole way of thinking. And in Colorado, there's an organization that's been working with Governor Hickenlooper and others called Skillful, which really tries to identify the skills you need to do a job, and then help determine whether people are competent to do those skills. It's not based on whether or not they have a degree from, CU, for example, but do they have the skills actually needed to do the job they're being hired for? That's a very different way of looking at the job market. But if you take an example, let's say that somebody goes to CU and gets a degree in anthropology or philosophy, which are great subjects, but they don't translate necessarily directly into a job. The skills some of the skills that they're picking up there do, but knowledge of archaeology or anthropology or philosophy is not required for most jobs in the state of Colorado. So what I'm talking about is getting a better grip on what skills do you actually need to do that job well.
I see. I really enjoyed that explanation. That's definitely something I think obviously is merging, and you mentioned that Skillful is partnering with the governor in Colorado to focus on that. One of the big things that we do focus on in Colorado is education. We are very passionate about that. Governor Hickenlooper has several initiatives for education. Do you think we're coming closer to a merging between these schools and businesses to find the right students and the right people for these jobs?
I think some progress has been made, but I think there's a lot more to do. One of the unique things about Colorado is that it's a tremendous magnet for young people who've recently gotten a degree. Some are coming out to Colorado because they're interested in skiing and the mountain lifestyle. Others just like the ambiance of Denver. By the way, I used to live in Denver, so I'm very familiar with it. And it's a very outdoor-oriented state. There are a lot of young people, so it's really attractive. So that's one of the things that Colorado has going for it is the fact that many people who've gotten advanced degrees want to move to Colorado and live there. The challenge is, if you actually look at the schools in Colorado, that's what we're talking about. How can we improve those skills to help more young people find a career they're going to like and get the education they need to pursue that? And I think on that front, there's still a lot of work to be done, especially if you look at some of the more vulnerable populations. Low-income students, Latino students continue to lag way behind their white counterparts, for example. Native Americans also continue to lag way behind. So there's a lot of work to be done to improve the system so it's really serving all students and not just some.
Absolutely. Do you have anything on the agenda for this Western Pathways Conference to figure out those issues?
Right. Well, this is really what the entire conference is all about. So the goal of the conference is to figure out how can states work to create a system that's going to prepare more young adults for career success. And a foundation for that, one of the key principles we talk about at the conference is what we call career development. What career development means is it's the whole process of helping young people figure out what career might be a good fit for them, and then what's the best pathway to that career. Right now, we put very little attention on that in the schools. So what we're suggesting is let's start at an early age, even in elementary school, talking to kids about the whole range of jobs available. And when I say that, I'm not talking about just doctors and lawyers, which kids do learn about. I'm talking about a full range of jobs. For example, what about being an auto mechanic, auto technology? We've been working with that industry down here in Arizona, and many of those jobs pay extremely well. They certainly pay a solid middle-class wage. Another great example in Arizona is air conditioning repair. I can guarantee you that if you have the skills needed, if you've learned how to repair air conditioners, you've mastered those skills, you're going to have no problem getting a job, and you're going to certainly be making well over $40,000 a year. I mean, it's very well paid. That does not require a 4-year university education. What it does require is technical training. So we're advocating that we should spend a lot more time talking to young people about what their career options are, as well as analyzing what are their interests and what are their abilities. What are they really good at? Because if you can find something you're good at, you're more likely to be successful at that. Of course, it's probably going to be a better career option. And as part of that, we're advocating that students be encouraged to develop a plan for their life. For example, in middle school, it would make sense to develop a plan for how are they going to make the most out of high school? What are they going to study in high school? What electives are they going to pursue? And then by the time they graduate from high school, we'd like to see them develop a plan for their life. What are they going to do right after high school? Are they going to go into the military? Are they going to seek employment right away? Are they going to go on to college? And if so, are they going to go to a community college, a 4-year university? And what are they going to study when they get there? Right now, many young people do not do that, and that's one reason why student debt is so high. They go to a place like CU and they haven't really figured out what they want to do with themselves. They might take a lot of courses that don't really lead them anywhere, and so that lengthens the time of their education and also the cost.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the big issues we tackle at the conference.
I gotcha. Well, and I could be wrong here, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but there tends to be two schools of thought here when it comes to education. One of those is that kids are trying to decide at 18 years old what they want to do for the rest of their lives, right? And that's a tough decision to make at 18. You can't even drink yet. And so I think forcing kids into choosing a career at that age is pretty tough. The other side of that is if we start earlier, as you mentioned, in elementary school to figure out this pathway, do you think that we're forcing kids to be too much of an adult and decide what they want to do too young?
No, I don't. And I think that the reason why it's so difficult for many 18-year-olds to figure out what they want to do is they know almost nothing about the job market and nothing about themselves. They spend a lot of time learning the required subjects and trying to meet the standards set for those subjects. They spend almost no time exploring the whole range of careers that are out there and which ones might interest them. The other thing, Alex, is that one of the big problems in high school, and it sounds like you graduated from high school relatively recently. Certainly when I was in high school, a huge percentage of the kids were bored. And that's still true today, unfortunately. Many kids are bored, they're disengaged. They really don't like to go to high school. They're not excited about that. What we found is that if you help a kid find a career passion, it just totally transforms their life. So my youngest son, for example, in middle school decided he was really interested in becoming a chef. And he was able to go to a vocational technical high school where he could actually major in culinary arts. And his whole attitude changed enormously. He went from being a middling student to a straight A student. He actually won the gold medal as the top high school chef in the state where we lived then, which was Massachusetts. All of that, and not only that, he got a job or an apprenticeship, if you want to call it like that, at one of the top restaurants in Boston when he was 17 years old. It was an award-winning restaurant. His whole perspective on life changed enormously. And that's really what Governor Hickenlooper's been trying to encourage with CareerWise, to give high school students the opportunity to get involved in apprenticeships and take part in those.
Which I believe would be awesome for our students to be able to do that. Let me ask you this question. Would this change our whole education system, right? You go to school and it's the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. But now you're saying that if we focus on this, if we open it up more to looking at careers that you can choose and therefore choosing classes that will help you gain knowledge and certificates in that career, are we forgetting about the reading, writing, and arithmetic?
Alex, the opposite is actually the case. If students are studying something that they're excited about, their literacy and math skills are more likely to increase than if they're studying something they're not excited about. I think one of the greatest examples is American history. American history is something that every high school student in America is required to study. And yet the famous historian David McCullough says he feels the current generation of young Americans is almost completely historically illiterate. For example, they recently did a survey and asked students what was the cause of the Civil War, what led to the Civil War. Only 6% cited slavery. You know, it's astonishing that you get an answer like that.
Wow.
You know, many students do not understand World War II, what led to World War II, and other major historical events. The reason is they're taking history, they're sitting through an entire year of history, but they're not engaged, they're not excited. And so very little is sinking in, they're not learning much, they're not gaining an understanding. Now, in contrast, if you put that student into a class they're really excited about, maybe it's graphic design, maybe it's pre-engineering studies, maybe it's construction, maybe it's auto technology, whatever it is, they're going to be far more alive. You know, if you take a young boy, and many of them are boys that are interested in this, in auto technology, if they're working in what amounts to an auto shop, working on repairing a car, that's something they're going to be really excited about if that's what they want to do. They're probably going to be far more engaged with that than they are in the history class they're required to take.
That is fascinating. Thank you for that answer, Bill. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back after these messages. Stay with us. Be sure to like and subscribe on our YouTube page, and we'll be right back here on Connect and Collaborate. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. Today and all week we have been talking about higher education. I have on the phone with me right now Bill Symonds. He is the director of the Global Pathways Institute at Arizona State, and he's a professor there as well. And so we just got done talking, Bill, about changing the education system, right? We have these kids that are excited to learn, and so if they're excited to learn, they're going to retain that information and they're going to be great students. And you gave the example of the Civil War. Only 6% of students knew that it started because of slavery, which to me is astonishing. And we talked about how excited kids can be to learn if we've honed in on those skills. What I want to ask you next is, how young do you think we should start these programs? Do we need to start it in middle school, high school, elementary school? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think we need to start pretty young. The reason I say that is I think the core goal of education, I think most people would share, is to expand opportunity for our kids. And we often neglect or overlook all of those students who are living in poverty or low-income situations. In Colorado, the federal definition of poverty is $24,000 for a family of four. A family of four. Now, listeners who are listening to this, just ask and think to yourself, how good a lifestyle are you going to have in Denver if you're making $24,000 a year and you're supporting 2 adults and 2 kids? I think it's going to be pretty tough. Many people argue that definition is out of date. Now, even if you double that to $48,000 a year, which is still not a lot of money, 38% of the children in Colorado fall into that category, 38%. So I think to those children in particular, I mean, if they're living in Boulder or Cherry Hills Village or someplace like that, maybe it's not a concern. But for the 38% who are living in low-income situations, what we're really talking about is how can they get out of that? How can they find a career pathway that's going to help them improve themselves and get into the middle class as opposed to poverty? And that's a goal we haven't focused on enough in recent years, but I think it's an absolutely paramount goal. And it's really about restoring the American dream for these young people.
The American dream, right, is to take yourself in any situation that you're in and you can build yourself up. And what you're saying is that we can actually utilize our education system better than what we have in the past to be able to help these students achieve that American dream. Let me ask.
Right.
Yeah, let me ask how it looks. Are we looking at more charter schools in the future? Is this going to change the public school system into more of a charter school focus?
Well, charter schools are sort of a separate issue in terms of how schools are organized and run. I think the real question is what's the quality of education? And the research shows that while some charter schools are excellent, others actually do worse than the public schools. So the fact that the school is a charter school doesn't mean it's a great school. That really depends on who's operating the charter school and what's happening inside that building. I think a more important question for what we're talking about is what are students actually doing in school? What are they studying? What we're advocating is much more focused on things that students are going to be able to use going forward. Let's take the issue of math. Right now, most students in Colorado are either encouraged or required to take Algebra 2 in high school. The reason for that is that it's an important metric for whether or not you're going to get accepted at a four-year college like CU or CSU. However, fewer than 10% of all jobs actually require Algebra 2, fewer than 10%. On the other hand, financial literacy is not widely taught. Now, by financial literacy, we talk about learning things like how can you take on debt and what's that going to do to your standard of living? How much money do you need to make to achieve your goals in terms of the lifestyle you want to live and that kind of thing? What's the best way to buy a house? Very basic things like that that really apply to almost 100% of the kids in our schools. And it's really ironic that we do not focus on that. We don't spend a lot of time teaching financial literacy, and yet we do require all students to take Algebra 2, which very few of them ever use again. So I think refocusing our schools on things that are going to have more impact on students is a good thing to do.
I wholeheartedly agree. I do know when I was in school, I learned how to write a check in 8th grade in my home ec class, and that was all the financial literacy that I was allowed. And that was a day's worth of work, right? Needless to say, I have quite a bit of school debt that I am trying to overcome myself. So, Bill, you've got some great points here. I love this about talking about changing the entire education system. Do you have a timeline for how you would like to see this play out?
Well, so one of the things we're doing at this conference in collaboration with the Colorado Business Roundtable is we're holding a think tank actually this week in Denver. We brought in national leaders to develop a framework for what states can do to create a more effective system. And that think tank is going to be hosted by Education Commission of the States. Now, people may not be aware who are listening to this, but Education Commission of the States is a national organization based right in Denver on Broadway. And what they do is they work with all 50 states to help them study their education policies and what works better and what doesn't work as well. They've gotten very interested in the issues we're talking about, and that's why they're hosting this think tank. So coming out of that, we're going to be publishing some suggestions for states. What kind of action plan can they develop to create a better system for improving their students? And we're going to be sharing that at this year's Western Pathways Conference. Then the hope is that the states will go back and try to implement these ideas. So right now in Colorado, I know that your radio station, along with others, has been focusing a lot of attention on the gubernatorial election. Colorado's going to have a new governor. The question is that new governor going to make these issues a priority? trying to create a better education system that's going to help more students in poverty get out of poverty and into the middle class in Colorado. That's really the question we're raising.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things, education and politics do go hand in hand. As much as we kind of hate that, right? We shouldn't have to ask legislators for all the things for the education system. But this is an interesting take, right? We're shaking things up quite a bit on the education spectrum. What is your ideal outlook for the end product? What is your end product goal for this, Bill?
Well, we're really talking about some fundamental changes in how education operates. Let me cite a couple of examples. One is how much exposure are students getting to the workplace while they're in school before they graduate. We advocate a tremendous expansion of those opportunities. That could be an internship, it could be an apprenticeship, et cetera. As I said earlier, my son, who was interested in culinary arts, when he was a junior, started working at a country club. And he was actually allowed to take time off school to do that work. The reason is he was learning about his field. He was learning about what it takes to be a great chef. And in senior year, he was actually spending every other week in one of the top restaurants in Boston. Now, that's a radical change from a student who goes to Wheat Ridge High School, for example, every day and spends his entire high school career inside that building. All they're doing is going to classes. They're not getting exposed to anything. So we'd like to see a system in which high school kids in particular get out of the building a lot more and start exploring fields. It's really going to add a lot to their education. It's going to make them far more engaged.
Absolutely. On-the-job training is essential in any market, right? Across the board.
Yeah, Alex, I wouldn't call this on-the-job training. I would call it sort of career exploration. So in my son's case, he worked in a restaurant. That was really helping him to decide, is this the field he wanted to pursue? The culinary industry is one of the largest in America. The number of restaurants in Denver and in Colorado is enormous. They all need chefs. He was figuring out, is this what he wanted to do with his life? And so it's not so much job training as it is job exploration. And that is absolutely invaluable, I think, for all young people, whether they want to be a surgeon, they want to be an auto mechanic, whatever they want to do.
Absolutely. I definitely concur with that. Bill, let me ask you, so every plan that somebody has, every goal that a business puts out there, there are definitely going to be failures along the way, right? So have you had any failures on your path to achieving the success that other states can learn from to not make that same mistake?
The biggest challenge we're facing is resistance to change. So our existing way of doing school has been around for a long time. The courses that students take in high school, many of those courses, 3 years of English, 4 years of math, et cetera, that was all laid out by a committee back in the 19th century, believe it or not, at Harvard University. And that's been in effect pretty much ever since then. The tragedy today is I think that people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, if they went back to high school, wouldn't see that many changes from when they were in high school. It hasn't changed that much. Now let's look at every other area of society. Let's look at communications. Back when they were in high school, the newspaper was dominant. There were a couple of TV stations. That was about it. Today, the media landscape is totally and completely different. Very few people get print newspapers. The number of digital outlets has just exploded beyond belief. Some of it's high quality journalism, some of it isn't. The number of TV stations is in the hundreds instead of 3 broadcast networks. Everything has changed dramatically. The funny thing is, or the tragedy is, that when you look at our high schools, there hasn't been that kind of change. We're still doing the things the same way, and somehow we expect that if we just try harder, that's going to produce a different result than we've been getting for years. What we're suggesting is it's time for a new approach.
Right. I would imagine that you probably don't have resistance from educators on this. Is that correct?
No, actually, many educators are actually quite conservative and not really pushing for change. I think a lot of the impetus for change is coming actually from the business community, from leaders like the Colorado Business Roundtable. And that's because business leaders are very concerned. They don't feel our schools today are really giving them the kind of workforce they really want. And what business wants is a couple of things. They certainly want workers who have the right skills for the job, but they also want workers who are committed, that they really believe in the success of that organization. So to use an example, I think that the Denver Broncos probably don't have a problem finding employees who are enthusiastic about the Broncos, because there's a lot of people like that in Denver who would love to work for the Broncos. Many companies, though, really struggle to find that kind of person, someone who's really committed to what that company is trying to achieve and wants to help it succeed. And that's what we're talking about, trying to help young people find those opportunities in those pathways.
Absolutely. That's an interesting take there. So, Bill, give us just a overview of how this year's Western Pathways Conference is going to go. What does each day entail, as much as you can at least share with us so that we don't ruin any surprises?
Okay. Well, I think the first thing is I would really encourage your listeners to look into attending the conference. This year's conference is going to be held in downtown Salt Lake City, which, if you haven't been there, is an absolutely spectacular location. The conference is going to start on Wednesday afternoon, May 30th. That's the Wednesday after Memorial Day, and it will wrap up with lunch on Friday, June 1st. And throughout those 3 days, be really action-packed days. By the way, the conference website is westernpathways.com. Very simple, westernpathways.com. And if you go to that website, you're going to see the agenda. You're going to learn about registering for the conference. You're going to learn about the hotel. And we've negotiated a terrific deal. Of course, we have a room block for the hotel. Rooms are only $159 a night. And the conference includes, unlike many conferences, 5 meals. We're having a gala dinner on Wednesday night. We've also got breakfast and lunch on Thursday and Friday. So during the course of the 3 days, first of all, on Wednesday morning, participants will have an opportunity to attend pre-conference field trips. One of those field trips will be down to Silicon Slopes. Everybody's heard of Silicon Valley in Utah. Silicon Slopes is an emerging area where many startup tech companies are based. One of the companies down there, for example, is Ancestry.org, which has become very famous for helping people figure out their genealogy. So that's one field trip. We're going to have another field trip out to Western Governors University, which is one of the nation's largest online universities, really designed for working adults. So there's going to be tremendous opportunities to learn. The conference itself will start on Wednesday afternoon with opening remarks from the governor of Utah. That night, we're going to have a tremendous dinner, which is going to showcase why Utah has become one of the fastest growing states in the U.S. For the last decade. On Thursday, we're going to look at educational innovators, people who are really doing what we're advocating, changing the mold in education. And then on Thursday at lunch, we're going to have keynote remarks from the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith. So it really is an action-packed agenda.
It truly is. I know that last year's I was able to attend, and it was fascinating. We had the founder of LinkedIn actually speak at that conference, and that was
right.
Yeah, I was not someone that was well versed in LinkedIn before that conference, and I have to tell you, I did my homework after his talk, and I really enjoy LinkedIn. Which for those of you that are seeking employment out there, please check out LinkedIn, get your profile up. Lots and lots of institutions check that out to make sure that you are going to be a good candidate for their company. Bill, we have about 8 minutes here, and is there something that you really wanted to touch on, that your message that you need to get out there?
Yes, I'd say that following up on the conference, this is just a tremendous opportunity for educators, for business leaders, and for public officials who are listening. If you're a mayor, if you're on the school board, et cetera, to learn about how we can create a more effective system that's going to serve the people of Colorado better. And you have an opportunity, if you'd like to attend the conference, to become affiliated with the state team, the Colorado state team, attend the conference, connect with them, learn about other people from Colorado who are coming. Stephanie Beck, she's director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council, really a central leader in Colorado in terms of trying to develop all of these policies. So it's a tremendous learning opportunity. It's also a tremendous networking opportunity to meet other people who are interested in promoting this change and creating a better system. And I think the bottom line, Alex, is that for people who've been frustrated or had problems with the current system, maybe they've had a son or a daughter who's gone to college, taken on a lot of debt, but not really been able to find a good job after they graduated. That's one of the issues we talk about at the conference. Maybe they've got a son or daughter who's still struggling to figure out what they want to do with their life, even though they're in their 20s. Again, that's another issue we're addressing. Maybe they're a business leader who's concerned about the difficulty in hiring the people they need to make their business a success. And again, that's another issue we're going to be touching on at the conference. So it's something that speaks to a wide variety of people. And we do have a lot of educators, business leaders, and government leaders who attend the conference. Tremendous networking opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. So across the board, whether you're an educator, whether you're in business, whether you're a student yourself, this is a great conference to attend to see where the education system is moving and to really hone in on your skills that are marketable, right?
Right. And again, that website is westernpathways.com. Check it out. You'll see information on last year's conference, which was held in Denver, and on this year's conference, which is going to be in Salt Lake from May 30th to June 1st.
May 30th to June 1st. Thank you very much, Bill. So we're going to wrap up this conversation here. And Bill, I would like you to tell us your words of encouragement for students out there. What is your favorite thing to tell your students in your classroom when they go out to search for a job?
Well, what I would, it's not so much what I'm telling students. What I'm telling everyone is I think we can create a system that's going to work a lot better for young people in the U.S. and help a lot more young people find the career that's going to give meaning to their life, allow them to earn a middle-class living, and do it faster and at less cost than what we're spending right now.
Absolutely. That is a great takeaway. We are here with Bill Symonds. He is the director of the Global Pathways Institute at Arizona State. He is also a professor out there. Bill, what do you teach at Arizona State? We didn't touch on that.
Well, actually, I'm what they call for practice. What I do is run the institute. I'm not actually teaching a class as such.
Ah, okay. Well, that is exciting, though.
So it's sort of like being a research professor when you're doing research. Gotcha.
Well, I'm glad that they made that space available for you, and that you've got this wonderful conference that has been born out of the Global Pathways Institute. Thank you so much, Bill. It's been a pleasure having you on today. Any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, again, I'd really encourage people of any interest in this to check out the website, westernpathways.com. Look into it. If you've got some questions, our contact information is on there. Feel free to give us a call. We can talk to you, put you in touch with other people from Colorado who are going to come to the conference. Really a tremendous opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. And for our audience out there, please like and subscribe our YouTube page. Check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a great day, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye.